This is episode number 204 of the ABAP podcast. And in this episode, we will be talking with Veronika Karlova, whose passion and enthusiasm for all things vodka is absolutely contagious. Her perspective on it and her history and experience with it definitely changed the way I look and approach vodka as well. And hopefully it will give you some new insights as well. So hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the interview, shall we? Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And today we have a special guest. And for anybody that loves vodka or vodka cocktails, this episode is going to be for you. So we have Veronika Karlova from Girls Drink Vodka, and she's going to share her passion about vodka and vodka cocktails with us. So Veronika, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
First of all, and before we get started, I just want to say thank you because before we started recording, I realized that you're in the UK in a completely different time zone. So I thank you very much for your flexibility.
That's okay. I mean, it's a perfect time to have a vodka cocktail while I'm recording, so.
Perfect. That's very true. Yeah, it's still a little early for me. It's about 2:00 in the afternoon. So, but I will have one later on today. I already have a cocktail date on the calendar here for later. So probably going to be a vodka cocktail most likely.
That's great.
So how did you kind of, well, first of all, Girls Drink Vodka is a blog and also your social media handle for Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And so what made you focus on vodka as far as like content creation and something you're really, really passionate about?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm originally from Slovakia. So Slovakia is kind of like a country that was always connected with vodka distilling. So, vodka was part of our culture. There was always a bottle of homemade vodka on the table, and my dad used to distill vodka. So that was kind of my background. And then about 12 years ago, I moved to the UK. And I figured that people in the UK actually didn't know much about vodka. They knew vodka and Coke and vodka lemonade, and that was pretty much it. So that kind of triggered my interest in kind of trying to educate people or tell them more about how good vodka can be, and that's not just about Smirnoff, but there are different brands that really are worth trying out. So that was the original idea.
So you have a very long history with vodka then. It sounds like it's almost a family tradition for you, or a cultural kind of tradition.
Yes. So you probably, we all associate vodka with obviously Russia and Poland, but all the Central European countries, they kind of were connected to vodka just the way, even Scandinavia or Baltic countries. So, not many people know that, but Slovakia, most of people drink vodka in Slovakia.
Interesting. Okay. So while I have you on this subject, I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a detour here, but I would love to know, are there kind of drinking traditions regionally around vodka? Because I think when we think of vodka in the United States, primarily, we think of, some of the classics, martinis, Moscow mules, stuff like that. But there must be a pretty rich tradition on how people consume vodka in those states. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So you definitely don't mix vodka in Slovakia. So the most common, obviously, tradition, and you will be familiar with it because it's very typical for Russia and Poland as well. You have a bottle of vodka on the table, and then you have shot glasses, and that's how you drink it. So normally it is either fridge temperature or freezer temperature. So it's kind of chilled, and then there is a lot of food on the table at the same time. So it kind of allows you to go through all night drinking shots of vodka, doing shots of vodka while you're eating all sorts of pickles and homemade sausages and cheese and stuff like that. So that would be probably the most popular way of drinking vodka at home.
And the vodka you guys are drinking, it sounds like it's created by the families or a small producer within that town. Does that sound about right?
That's correct. So every street or every kind of like cul-de-sac would pride themselves in, having the best vodka in town or the village. So, the neighbors would meet up and they would all bring a bottle of homemade vodka. And then all the, my dad and his neighbors would then assess whose vodka is the best. Like obviously vintage, which year.
No kidding.
Yes.
So these are like actually cellared and kind of like put away for like probably special occasions or revisiting, like kind of like wine is then.
Yes, that is correct. And there is actually one interesting tradition that I will mention. So when a child is born, every father would dig up a hole and bury a bottle of his homemade vodka in the garden. And then either on your 18th birthday or on the day of your wedding, they would dig it up and drink it to celebrate.
No kidding. That's so fascinating. That's amazing.
Yeah. So interesting traditions where I come from.
No, that's so fascinating because there are definitely kind of other drinking, other spirits that have similar kind of drinking traditions. It's usually, special occasions or around a meal, and they usually kind of go hand in hand. So that's really cool. I didn't realize, I didn't know about that. That's super interesting and fun. And I'm sure we can have an entire podcast just focus on that, but we got to I got to steer us back in a kind of a different direction here. But I'm so fascinated, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about that maybe later.
Yes, definitely.
So for when we think about, well, actually, one last point is, if I'm not mistaken, on your website, I also saw that you kind of judge vodka as well. You kind of have like a spirits competition around vodka. Is that correct?
Yes, so I do participate in a lot of different judging competitions. Obviously, I specialize in vodka judging, but one thing I'm going to say, every judging competition is pretty much different because there's so many different types of vodka. People don't realize, obviously, the original kind of idea that people have is that vodka has no color, no smell, it's, flavorless, but that is not the case. And so we've got different judging competitions that kind of focus whether they judge based on what ingredient, what raw material you use to make vodka, or the other competition focuses on the regions. So where does vodka come from? So they judge based on those criteria, or frankly, you either judge on like neutrality of the vodka, or varietal category. You would judge on kind of like residual character of the vodka. So there are different competitions, and I would definitely recommend for any vodka brands that, if they want to kind of raise their profile, to enter one of those competitions, because it's always, you get good feedback on your products. So that is always a very interesting part of my job to judge.
Perfect. And I got to ask one follow-up question here, because I think within the United States, we have very strict rules around what can be classified as vodka. It has to be distilled to a very high level and basically be flavorless, odorless, and all that stuff. So the subtlety really comes into that, what's left in the still at like 2 to 3% or something like that. But I'm really curious to see, with kind of your history and in Slovakia and kind of seeing all those different regional styles of vodka, is that the same, or is it very different as far as flavor textures? Like, is the historical ones that you're familiar with versus the mainstream brands, how different are they, and what are those differences?
Yes, you're very right. So obviously, if we're following legal definition in the US, vodka has to be distilled up to 95% ABV. The European law is very similar. It has to be distilled up to 96. So we go even further. So, it's just tiny little 1%, but it kind of makes difference in the final product.
Right.
But as you mentioned, historically, vodka, before even the invention of the column still, tasted completely different. It was something called polugar, or bread wine, or in Poland they called it gorzalka. So it had a lot of character. It was normally even flavored, because the quality of the spirit wasn't so good. They would try to mask the original spirit flavored with kind of like herbal infusion. Probably the most famous infused vodka we know is Zubrovka, which is flavored with bison grass. And originally it was obviously created because of the kind of like medicinal purposes. Vodka was cure for everything. But so after the invention of the column still, the distillation process changed rapidly, and together with invention of filtration, charcoal filtration also. So it kind of created the vodka that we know these days. So it's as neutral as it gets, it's as flavorless, distilled as many times as possible and filtered as many times as possible. So hence the definition as neutral and like flavorless. But I'm not sure if you were aware, in last year, in 2020, the US law actually changed. And
I'm not familiar with this, no.
Yeah, definition of vodka changed. So it doesn't say anymore. It has to be odorless, colorless, and flavorless, which is a big step forward, because I think they started to consider all the little craft distilleries and the craft movement, because those distilleries started creating vodka that had a lot of character and didn't fit the definition, but still was within the legal definition. So that's where we are at the moment. And I've really, really encouraged that movement, because some of the vodkas I've tasted, they are absolutely fantastic. So
very cool. That's so exciting. And honestly, it kind of makes me more excited about like these small regional vodka producers that have been doing it for generations, to actually be able to, like, kind of what we saw with Mezcal is, all these people have been doing it for 400 years. And then all of a sudden it's really popular. So if we're able to see kind of a better, or kind of a more true style of vodka, like historically, I think that could be really, really fascinating.
Yes, I agree. So there's finally you can appreciate that taste. And as you said, those distilleries, families have been producing for many years or even centuries. And now finally, kind of like that farm to bottle approach is really appreciated, because if you want to produce a good vodka, you really have to control the whole process of the distillation and production. So that's where it all starts, when you know where you grow your ingredients, where does your water come from. That really, really makes a difference.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit more about your experience, kind of some of the vodkas that you've been introduced to, because I'd love to get your thoughts on some really, really great vodkas to try in a couple different price points, because I'm really fascinated as well, because I think we have kind of the standards that we all know and love and we're familiar with, but I'd love to talk to somebody whose passion truly is vodka. So a couple different price points, and I'm not sure if all these are going to be available here in the United States, but we'll try to find links for them. So like in that $1 to $20 range, I hope nobody's buying dollar vodka, but within that kind of window, is there any kind of brands that you really would love to highlight and kind of say, if you can find this, definitely try these out?
Yeah. Well, I will try to mention the accessible brands and kind of that people, the brands that people recognize. So I will probably start with the kind of traditional vodka brand. In that price category is Wyborowa, which is a famous Polish brand made from distilled from rye. And over here, it's normally used as a house pour because of the obviously price point, but the quality is really, really good. So I would definitely recommend trying this as your standard vodka for mixing. Then I know in the recently one of the vodka competitions I was judging, Burnett's vodka from Heaven Hill brands was actually the winner. So that's also the grain-based spirit. spirits. So that's very, very accessible price point. And then just brands, famous brands like Kettle One, Finlandia, they are all very good quality because, as you mentioned, that kind of distilling heritage and tradition is there. So hence, I would definitely, you're never going to go wrong with those brands. Maybe just something unique that I will mention. There is one distillery in East London. It's called East London Liqueur Company, and they actually are producing vodka that is about, I'll say, £18, which is about $22, I would say. So it's still kind of like a craft vodka, which is unusual for craft vodka have such a low price point, but the quality is really, really good. So I think all those that I mentioned in the standard category, that they are worth trying and checking out.
Perfect. Yeah, I remember actually I used to use Finlandia in my well, kind of just my house pour for the longest time. That and also Luxusova. I know I'm butchering the name, but those two usually kind of went hand in hand in my well. For the same thing, good price point and good quality spirits for sure.
Yeah. So Luxusova definitely the very similar price point to Viborova. I think the difference is that Luxusova I think is potato rather than rye, but still that Polish heritage distilling heritage is there, so you cannot fault it.
Perfect. Cool. So let's take them kind of the next step up. So like you have a little bit more money to spend, you want to try something cool, that from that $20 to $40 window, what are some recommendations you would have?
I would probably start something that everyone should try, I think, is Reika. So the Icelandic vodka, which I think for the quality, it's a very, very approachable price still. So, and it's unique because it's from Iceland. Then something from America I would mention that's really worth trying is Bar Hill. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. Yeah,
it's so good.
Very unique approach again. So obviously their vodka is made from honey, which is super special, and the taste is just unbeatable. So if you have a chance, try it because it's really worth it. And maybe you probably heard of Fair Vodka. I would also recommend. So also a different approach. So it's kind of fair approach to the production process, and it's made with quinoa based spirit, which is again very unique. Yeah. So I would recommend trying Fair. I'm pretty sure it's available in the US as well as throughout Europe. So that would be my pick in that category. Then maybe I'll mention even Australia is picking up in like vodka distillation production. So they have a brand called 666, which is made in Tasmania. And they even have an expression that is made with real butter. So
what is that?
Well, it's just taste is really creamy. So similar, these days you have all vodkas made from whey. So over here we call them vodkas made from milk. So that kind of similar approach, but it just kind of delivers creamier mouthfeel if you add a little bit of kind of like a dairy into your vodka.
Sure.
And
but it's still clear, right? Like crystal clear?
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah. So I think you add the flavor and then redistill. So just make sure that the spirit is clear. So that's an interesting brand. And there is another one that I'm really, really keen on. It's called Kafka Vodka. So it's a recently new brand, but it's kind of like the history and tradition we were talking about. So the brand is claiming to produce vodka as it used to taste back in time. So they actually mix two different kinds of grain spirit, wheat and rye, 50-50. And then they actually add a little bit of apple and plum distillate in the vodka. So that kind of delivers sweetness at the same time, maybe fruity notes, but
Mm-hmm.
it kind of like enhances the character. So this is very kind of like new approach and quite trendy these days. So what a lot of distillers are doing, they produce the neutral grain spirit or any neutral spirit for vodka, and then after the distillation, they kind of add a little like so-called micro infusions,
Sure.
just to kind of, instead of, let's say, adding too much sweetness like sugar or glycerin, they just add kind of like infusions, herbal infusions or honey infusions or so on. So kind of like delivers the character.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that would be probably this category in kind of like middle price point.
Perfect. Okay, and then let's take that kind of final jump. Let's go money no object. Special occasion, your son is born, your daughter's born, you got to throw it in the ground for 18, 21 years, whatever. What would you get?
So I'll have to mention, you probably heard of Beluga vodka.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So they have a gold line edition, which is very unique, something that you don't drink every day. And kind of with the bottle, I don't know if you've seen the bottle, they have like a special opening ritual. It comes with a little hammer. So that kind of like, not just that, obviously, we say you drink with your eyes as well, but
Right.
obviously the bottle looks amazing. The liquid is fantastic. It's very pure, and I think if you have a chance, you should definitely try it. But it's not your everyday vodka, obviously, because it's quite expensive.
Now, what are we talking about as far as like getting your hands on that bottle?
Well, in the UK, it's about £130. So it would be 150, I would say, $160. So still, it's doable, but then obviously you have different expressions. You have limited editions of different brands that come in the beautiful like diamond or crystal decanters, where the price point can be from thousands to millions. So it's a different story. But I think the quality of the liquid needs to be special if you want to obviously charge a lot of money, but it's like as good as it gets. You cannot, I believe there is a like only the certain way you can go with distillation process. So yeah, you cannot achieve something that, I don't know, it's gonna deliver velvety taste.
Right.
It's gonna take you to Elysian Fields or something.
So have you had the Beluga, the one you were talking about?
Say it again.
Have you had a chance to try that Beluga vodka?
Yeah.
So how would you describe that? Like, take us on a tasting journey, if you will, on that vodka versus like something we're probably a little more familiar with, like a Kettle One or a Finlandia, for example. How would you describe the differences from a flavor profile and kind of an experience profile?
So in short, a lot of tastings I do, people normally, when they try a gold line, they normally say you can drink it like water. That's one of the way to describe it. But it's the whole journey. So from the nose, you won't be hit by that ethyl alcohol smell, where it's quite balanced, and then it's the body. It's still kind of full of character, but at the same time very well balanced and complex. So I think complexity would be the right word to describe it. And then there is this hint of sweetness, and then kind of like that lingers throughout the whole sip. So it kind of like it just makes you want to drink more.
Okay, that's perfect. And I've had kind of spirits like that where just like it just sits there and lingers. And it's kind of like this whole, like, I can't describe it. It's really hard to put into words, so I apologize for giving you that question. But it feels richer and smoother. And when you compare it, especially back to back, it makes everything else taste and experience really thin and flat. It's the only way I can describe it myself.
Yes, that's correct. And obviously with vodka, it really comes to the ABV as well, because if you have something that's 37.5, obviously, like you described, it will be kind of flat and very light compared to something that's 40 or 40 plus. But it really comes to what you have to ask yourself, what do I want to drink? Do I want vodka that's got a lot of character, or do I want something very light that's, it's not going to hurt my palate and, it's just going to kind of like taste flat. So, because there are some vodkas that deliver so much character, especially when I mentioned there's something called terroir in vodka. I know some people don't believe in it, but there is kind of like a lot of character that people are trying to deliver with their vodka brands, and that's completely different to like classic neutral vodka that we kind of used to.
Right. I remember one of the first vodkas I was introduced to that kind of really focused in trying to capture terroir was Carlson. I think I have the bottle right here.
Yeah.
And they do a really, really good job, in my opinion, just kind of being so different and that's so out there, with the flavor, because you can actually taste that essence of potato. I mean, it really kind of jumps out at you. But yeah, I think they were the first one that that's crossed my path that was really kind of focusing on terroir. And I know that's kind of only one element of terroir as kind of a term, but that's the one that kind of really jumped out at me. It's like, wow, this is truly different from anything else I've ever tried.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I know it quite well. And you're right. It was kind of like first brand that came and said, this is our vodka. This is kind of like vintage and terroir. This is what you're supposed to be tasting. And when you say, it's kind of with most of the brands that are promoting terroir are actually potato-based brands, because for some reason, and I did a little bit of research on obviously terroir and vodka, and it's just for some reason potatoes are a much better ingredient to use when you try to achieve different character, and the kind of like, because potatoes deliver this creamy notes, earthy notes, and kind of like vegetal notes at the same time. So you can work with something like wheat that doesn't deliver that kind of character. So that's hence most of kind of like vintage and terroir vodkas are made from potatoes.
That's really interesting because, I remember Carlson was doing vintages, and it was the first time I've ever heard of anybody making a vintage vodka because, beforehand it was the US version of just like clean, flavorless, odorless. And so somebody was like, no, it's different. Try this, and try this one too, which is different. It was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's why I think potato vodkas are not as favorite to mix in vodka cocktails as the grain-based vodkas, because they have much more character, and kind of sometimes it can interfere with some ingredients in the cocktail. So you cannot hide that vegetal and earthy taste.
Yeah, I kind of ran into that when I was trying to mix cocktails with it, because it didn't work the same. Like you just couldn't plug it into like a Moscow Mule, for example, because the balance is so different. You kind of got that kind of sweet earthiness and vegetal notes up against a giant ginger beer. It didn't work out so well.
Absolutely. It would certainly work in a martini. That's a perfect base for a martini. But
absolutely,
as you say, something like Cosmo or a Moscow Mule, it's a no.
Yeah, lemon drops, anything like that. You're like, nah, there's different choices out there. So kind of like to switch the conversation over to cocktails, because I know you do a lot of cocktails on your blog and Instagram as well, featuring vodka. In your opinion, is there any cocktails that don't really work with vodka? I think love to get your thoughts on that.
Funny you asked that, but I probably tried so many different cocktails, even like old fashioned with vodka, Negroni with vodka, like everything. And it still tastes great. But it really, depends. What do we still call it a Negroni? Do we call it vodka Negroni, old fashioned vodka right. Old fashioned, or, so it kind of like makes me think. So if I try margarita with vodka, am I going to call it margarita? Am I going to call it Guinness, or am I going to call it, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny because like I was trying to rack my brain around this too. Like I mean, there's cocktails you traditionally don't see vodka in. I think you hit on the one that I've used as an example in the past, and that is the old fashioned. But there's nothing wrong with it either. Like, it's just going to showcase the bitters and the sugar more. But if you have like something weighty, like a Carlson, or something that has a little bit more kind of that potato terroir driven focus on it, I think it would hold up really well in an old fashioned.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm all up for, experimenting with different types of vodka and different cocktails. So you never know what will match.
Right, exactly. In worst case scenario, you got to drink your mistakes, which is not a bad thing either, right? So let me see here. So in your opinion, what are some really good, like, if you're just getting started in cocktails, making cocktails at home, because a lot of people get introduced to it into the bar, where would you kind of steer them with vodka in vodka cocktails? Should be some of the, you got to try these staples first kind of cocktails?
So I was going to tell you a story. Like I went through phases, like, of vodka cocktails, which I used to like. So my first vodka cocktail love was White Russian.
That's a good one.
So I'm not sure if it's everyone's taste. Maybe try Black Russian first and then see if you can move on to White Russian. So those were the two that I tried first. Then I had I'm falling in love with Cosmo. So there was like 5 years, everywhere I went out, it was just Cosmo. And I was testing, do I like it sweeter? Do I like it with, more orange flavor? Do I like it more limey? Do I really like it, very, very savory, sour? And so that was another one of the vodka cocktails that I really enjoyed. And then after that, I discovered martinis, vodka martinis. So I think this is currently where I'm still at, vodka martinis. But obviously, I tried all the different vodka cocktails. As we already mentioned, Moscow Mule is a great one to try. Anything refreshing, I think I would say. People should start with something refreshing and then maybe move on to more sophisticated cocktails or more difficult cocktails. I like vodka gimlet. That's one of my favorites.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different types.
Perfect, excellent. Yeah, it's funny because like the Cosmo was such a thing. Like I've probably made thousands of Cosmos in my life behind a bar, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it. But it's a really good drink too when made properly. It is fantastic.
Yes. I could now we're talking about it, I just want to make one.
So I'm gonna have to ask you for your recipe on that one. So after your years of experimentation on that particular drink, where did you land as far as like, all right, I like my like Cosmos this way?
Yeah, with a lot of lime. So
okay.
That's what I tried the sweeter versions, but I think for some reason, I always expected it to be kind of like quite sour. And I think it makes the color look a little nicer when it's got a little more lime. So it's more kind of like light and I don't know. So yeah, I like it. And then I don't know what is your preference?
No, I think, I kind of dabbled in it towards the end of my career, like trying to make like a really great balanced, beautiful Cosmo. But I think I went a little bit heavier on Cointreau and lime. So I kind of had those two kind of battling each other almost. So you get that kind of more acidity, but then you get a little bit more pronounced orange out of it too. So that's kind of the direction I went with mine. But I think if I revisit it, I'd probably fall in the same camp of like a little heavier on the lime juice now. And but
it's funny because obviously I tried the either lime garnish or then the orange skin garnish. So it really kind of changes the character and the taste of the final drink. So
it does, yeah. It's incredible what those little tiny details can do to a cocktail.
Definitely.
Perfect. So I think final kind of cocktail question is, what is your favorite vodka cocktail of all time? I think you might have mentioned it already, but just
I already hinted. Well, it's a vodka martini. It's actually very, very dry vodka martini. So I kind of was on a mission to find like the best bar that would serve me the best vodka martini. But I couldn't, like, there were so many good places. And that's one thing I always say, like, young bartenders ask me, like, how to make or like give them advice how to make a good vodka martini. But that's the thing I always say to everyone, like, everyone thinks it's super easy to make. It's actually not. It's like just, very little ingredients, but you have to get every single step right in order to kind of deliver the desired character and the taste of the martini. So obviously it has to be chilled the right way. I don't like when it's watered down. So it's very, very, thin line between where it becomes too watery. Then obviously it all comes to like chilled glass, then what vermouth you're using, and obviously the garnish. I know there is one friend was telling me a story about his boss. He's the bar owner, and he used to come and sit at the bar and test their martinis. And it, like, my friend told me, oh, I made him the best martini. I served it the right way. And then he only sniffed it. He didn't even sip on the martini, and he said the lemon is off.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like, once you develop the palate that can, not even the palate, your smell that can tell that even the lemon zest is off without even tasting the martini, that's kind of like another dimension for me.
Absolutely, that's pretty next level for sure. So what is your kind of recipe? Like, if you're going to treat yourself, you're sitting at home, you want a nice martini just for yourself, what do you do?
So you probably guessed, but there's always a bottle of vodka in my freezer.
Okay, step one, gotta have it ice cold.
Yes, and there's always a couple of martini glasses in there as well.
Okay.
So it might sound cliche, but the way, kind of like Duke's way of making martini, it's my favorite way. So I just pour frozen vodka in a glass that I rinsed with tiny bit of vermouth, and then I whether I feel like an olive or a twist. I actually recently discovered something very new: caper leaves to use in my dry martini.
Those are so good.
Yeah, so they currently my favorite. So yeah, that's the way I make my martini.
That's awesome, because I know when you keep it in the freezer, even if you're to stir it with ice, it's not going to dilute almost at all, because it's almost the same temperature. It probably is the same temperature as your ice. So no dilution going. So the water factor that you were mentioning, it's not going to thin out. It's not going to get over diluted. There's nowhere for the ice to melt into because everything is the same temperature. Early in my bartender career, I found that out the hard way, because I was going to make a martini and I did all those things, and I didn't have any kind of background or taste developed at this point. So I tried it not expecting a kind of a thin, watered out version of a martini, but it was robust. It had all the flavor. It wasn't watered down at all. I wasn't expecting it at all.
Yeah, it was funny. Recently, actually, with my friend, we recorded a little YouTube video where we were testing all different ways of making a martini.
Yeah.
So obviously frozen, stirred, shaken, even like we did a version with olive oil, which was very interesting. Like, instead of garnish of an olive or lemon zest, we just put a drop of olive oil in there, and then tested another version where we shaken this drop of olive oil in the martini. I know you might say it might be dirty martini, but it's kind of like different. You don't use the juice, but it's just a tiny bit of olive oil, and obviously it's got different textures. So the actual final martini was with a different texture. So that was amazing to try, different ways, different temperatures, different. We used, obviously, as you already said, it's different texture for frozen vodka, then it's different texture for, even the room temperature vodka. So it kind of all depends and creates a different drink, although it's the same cocktail.
That's so crazy. Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, if you ever get to San Francisco, there's a restaurant called Brix. I think it's Brix. And they have, when you walk in the door, one of the things they do is they have a martini like setup, and they have a bunch of different bottles shoved into ice. So that might be the direction you go with. It's like, okay, I want one of those martinis.
Oh yeah. Well, I actually, funny you say, you mentioned San Francisco. I normally go there every year because I participate in ADI judging. So American Distilling Institute, they have
Yeah.
their craft judging competition,
Mhm.
and I managed to go. One of my favorite bars actually is a Trick Dog.
Oh gosh, yes.
And I had one of the best martinis there. So I have to say, like,
Nice, good,
very,
nice.
very, very big competition for London.
Right. And well, those guys are like top level, man. Those guys really know what they're doing. So
And it's
that's a
like
great, yeah.
I prefer bar without any, fuss, or like, I don't like when people are pretentious. So, I just want a friendly bartender to talk to me and mix me a cocktail that I will never forget.
Well, that's the place to go. And it's an exciting environment. There's no doubt about that. There's a buzz in that bar when you walk in.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I love bars like the Ritz in London or the Connaught, but get me in the Trick Dog and I'll be happy.
I think a lot of people would say that, especially in the cocktail world. That's kind of a special place for sure. So before we finish, if somebody wants to kind of really get into vodka and to start to explore vodka a little bit more, what advice would you give them?
Be open-minded.
Mm.
Don't be scared to try everything, because the more you try, your palate gets used to it, and it opens up, it develops. You kind of find yourself recognizing new flavors, new taste within obviously the vodka spirit and the vodka category. So I always say, if you have a chance to try different base vodkas, so potato, grain, as I said, whey, then obviously in the US, corn is very popular. So it kind of like delivers different character than wheat. So I always say, try to, taste different styles, and then hopefully you'll recognize the quality and that actually vodka is not all the same, and then try experimenting in the cocktails, what works with what kind of cocktail, and then you just have to find what you like, because we all have different tastes, we all like different things. So I always say, anything you taste, it's like, it's right. Like, I always ask for guys for tasting notes, and they come up with some amazing tasting notes when it comes to vodka. So and everyone's got a different palate. So I would just say, try as much as you can and just be open-minded. Don't look at vodka as a spirit with no character, because it's not anymore. It's got a lot of character.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the last thing is, if anybody had questions they want to ask you, or if you want to promote anything, is there a social media platform that you would steer them towards, or maybe your website?
Yeah, absolutely. As we already mentioned, you can find me at, just send me an email at girlsdrinkvodka.com, or any social media, Instagram. I'm always happy to help, or, if you want any advice on what vodka to try or what's currently trendy, then I'm always happy to help and recommend.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I do have one last question. I was thinking about this during the interview earlier when you were mentioning whey. But I would love to ask you, because you've tried pretty much most of the vodkas out there, or a lot of them, if I had to guess. What is the craziest vodka starting from a distillate source that you've ever tried? Because I know you mentioned, I know there's Black Sheep in the UK, I think.
Yeah, Black Cow. Yes, that's that's from whey. But there is another one. Yeah, another one that I always like to mention. It's called Cannes vodka, and it's made from mare's milk. And it's made in Kyrgyzstan. And it's, when you try it, it actually is like drinking blue cheese. So very, very intense flavor. So definitely is up there. Then obviously we already mentioned like oysters. So there's a lot of vodkas flavored with caviar or oysters. So that's quite interesting. And another one, very interesting one I tried was from Haiti, which was made from malanga root, which I had to Google what it was. But it's kind of similar, like potato slash horseradish. So it's something between, or maybe sweet potato mixed with potato and horseradish. So it's very popular apparently in Haiti. So that was one of the vodkas I tried, and it was very interesting.
Very cool. Well, see, the wide world of vodka. I cannot thank you enough for joining us, Veronika, and we'll have links to everything we talked about in the show notes. But Veronika, it's been a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.
So once again, thank you to Veronika Karlova for joining us and sharing her passion and just her history with vodka. I really had a lot of takeaways, specifically around how the traditional means of enjoyment around vodka were. Just sitting around a dinner table, having a contest in the neighborhood to see who produced the best vodka. It sounds awesome, and I hope we see more of that in the future. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you love cocktails, which I am assuming you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, I highly encourage you to go check out some of our premium barware over at abarabove.com. These products were born out of my frustration on the limitations of the tools that I had. So hopefully I've addressed all of them and made some really great tools for everybody that loves cocktails. So head on over to abarabove.com and check out our premium line of bar tools.